Welcome to another edition of How to Build Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Rod Khleif, and I am thrilled you're here. And it's not often I get to interview someone that I frankly respect and admire as much as today's guest. His name is Chris Voss. Now, Chris spent 24 years in the FBI Crisis Negotiation Unit and was the FBI's chief international and hostage and kidnapping negotiator from 2003 to 2007. He worked on over 150 international hostage cases, which I'd love to be a fly on the wall for some of those. He's also the CEO and the founder of the Black Swan Group, which is a high-level consulting firm that provides training and advises Fortune 500 companies through complex negotiations. But the reason I'm excited to have him on the show is he's the author of Never Split the Difference. The subtitle is Negotiating as if Your Life Depended on It. So maybe you're asking yourself, wait a minute, this is a real estate investing podcast. Where's the guy that I'm interviewing that's got thousands of multifamily units? Well, why am I interviewing a negotiation expert? Because life is negotiation, because your ability to negotiate with brokers, lenders, sellers, buyers, investors, partners is going to make or break you in this business. Now, I bought Chris's book and I liked it so much, I've given away over 150 copies of it. It hasn't been out that long, okay? It's an international bestseller, but it hasn't been out that long. Now, I've given a copy to my coaching clients. In fact, I just gave away 40 copies to my multifamily boardroom mastermind participants that were in Vegas with me a couple weeks ago, and I did a book summary on it. That's how much I like this. And you guys know I don't endorse things on this show. I really never have. Well, I'm endorsing this book. Get it. You need it. It's an essential textbook for negotiation. And if you're negotiating and you're sitting across from somebody that's read it, you're screwed if you haven't, okay? So we're going to dig into this book with him. Chris, I'm honored and humbled to have you on the show, buddy.
Thanks, man. Rod, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you. So, take just a second and talk about how you got into this very unusual, interesting business.
Well, I got into it because I was horrible at it. I didn't know anything about it. I was confused by it. I decided, I wanted to be a hostage negotiator, and I went to the woman that was in charge of the hostage negotiation team in New York. And she was impressed upon me that I was eminently unqualified for the position. I didn't know anything. I figured negotiating was simple. I figured it was just talk, which is not. So she said, look, go volunteer on a suicide hotline, and until you've got that under your belt, just don't bother me. And I went to the hotline and I was blown away. It was before we talked about emotional intelligence, but it was immersion and emotional intelligence.
Wow.
One of the things that really blew me away is they said, look, you're not going to be on a phone with anybody under any circumstances for longer than 20 minutes. I'm like, 20 minutes? You got to be kidding me. I can't even get my small talk done in 20 minutes. So no, if you do this right, you're going to cut to the heart of the matter very quickly. And that applies to our negotiations also. We took this idea and we put it in all negotiations. And you'd be shocked at how quickly you can both establish a great relationship with people and get stuff done with this kind of an approach. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, I can see it. That's why I'm so excited about this book. So let me ask you this. What skill sets does a good negotiator need to either be born with or learn? Is there any magic sauce there besides obviously the technology we're going to go into in a minute?
Well, I think, there really is being open to learning. I think that's what I was. You got to make mistakes. You learn from your mistakes. If you're not open to learning, some people say there's 10 years of experience and you can have 1 year of experience 10 times. So if you're willing to say, hey, look, I got to learn. I haven't mastered this. Anybody that I run into that tells me like, you know what, I'm a great negotiator. That's the sound of a closed mind. That's the sound of somebody who's not saying like, yeah, I still got a lot to learn. And if you're open to learning, that's the key issue. That's all you need.
Learning is earning, and no question, and I live by that as well. I've got a drawer full of lanyards. My wife doesn't know why I keep them, but it's really my education. There's literally hundreds of them from events that I've gone to and things that I learned. Well, let's get into your incredible book, my friend. So, I'm just going to do it chapter by chapter, and you just bounce around however it suits you. But there's just some really good stuff in here. that I'd love to drill into.
Right.
Can you talk about the first chapter? It's called The New Rules, and I actually like your subtitles better than the titles of the chapters. So, but the subtitle is How to Become the Smartest Person in Any Room. Can you speak to that and what you mean by that?
Yeah, and on a tangent, let me give a shout out to my co-writer, Tal Roz. I mean, Tal Roz structured the book, the titles, the subtitles, the chapters, everything. Tal's a genius business writer. He's actually got more than one of the best business books of all time to his name.
No kidding. Wow.
He's a co-author also with Never Eat Alone, which is Keith Flaherty's book on networking.
Yeah, that's a great book.
That's why I pulled Tal in, because I was blown away at how readable Never Eat Alone is, and he did the same thing for my book. So,
all right, shout out to Tal. Awesome, yeah. I mean, the book is awesome. So, okay,
genius writer. So the first, Tal realized the new rules are emotional intelligence. The old rules were rationality. Let's come to a wise agreement. Let's think about Zopa. Let's think about BATNA. All these academic terms that intellectually are flawless. Unfortunately, human beings are not intellectually flawless creatures.
Right.
We are driven by emotion. And the new rules are, like, each and every decision a person makes is based on what we care about, which makes decision by definition an emotional process. So the new rules are, let's take the emotional intelligence tools of hostage negotiators, put them into everything and work some magic. And that's really kind of what that's about.
Okay. But how do you become the smartest person in the room? What does that mean?
So you step back and you learn what other people know.
Okay.
Tiny tweak between our definition of negotiations and Herb Cohen's from You Can Negotiate Anything.
That's huge. Yeah, book. Yeah.
Business classic. Herb says negotiation is the use of information and power in a web of tension.
In a web of tension. Interesting. Okay.
Emotions, the tension are emotions. Ours is the gathering and use of information. The gathering is a key issue. I come to the table, I want to know what you know. And if my intelligence is the sum total of everybody's intelligence in the room, then I defer to you because you'll open up. People love to explain. People are dying to tell you what they know. They're dying to tell you how smart they are. They're dying to tell you what they know that you don't, because it makes them feel superior. I suck up all that data. Now I've got everybody's intelligence. That makes me the smartest guy in the room.
I got it. So it's really the information gathering that you're doing, and the strategies you use to do that that give you that advantage and that edge and make you the smartest person. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So the next chapter is Be a Mirror. And I'm going to pretend I haven't read the book. So is this about matching and mirroring? What is this about?
Yeah, it's a great question, because a lot of people get really confused on that.
Okay.
It is not about the body language. You put your hand to your chin, I put my hand to my chin, monkey see, monkey do kind of stuff. It is not that.
Okay.
Now, verbally, it's close to that, but there's an important distinction. Mirroring is repeating the last 1 to 3 words of what someone has just said.
Huh.
What someone has just said? I just mirrored myself. Now, this is the nuttiest thing, because everybody is so scared of this. And you start mirroring people, and they not only do they turn into fountains of information, but we were at a conference one time. It was a weekend conference, and this gentleman was there with his wife, and he mirrored everybody he talked to the entire conference. And people kept coming up to his wife saying, "Your husband is the most fascinating person and likable guy we have ever met." And by the time she was there for the second day, she caught on that all he was doing was mirroring. It took her 2 days to figure it out. She was
no kidding.
And it just annoyed the hell out of her, because everybody was raving about this guy.
People love themselves when they're talking, right? So basically he's just extracting. He's by asking questions, I assume, and I guess so. Give it. Can you give an example? Maybe actually, do you have a hostage example where you use this technique successfully?
Well, I did it off guard because you fall to your highest level of training. Mm-hmm. So I'm negotiating a bank robbery with hostages, and the bad guy is trying to keep his identity hidden from us. And I subtly let him know, like, look, we found your car, we got the registration. And he says, well, we only have more than one van. And I said, I didn't know what to say that. So I said, more than one van? He says, yeah, well, you traced my driver away. I said, we chased your driver away? He said, yeah, when he saw the police, he cut and run. Now, he just involuntarily gave me a whole bunch of information. And this was one of the most tightly controlled bad guys we ever ran across. He actually told the other negotiator earlier in the day that he was the calmest one at the scene. So a guy that was that tightly controlled suddenly starts blurting out information. He told us about a bank robber that was involved that we had no idea was there, that had gotten away. We had, because since the guy had gotten away, we didn't even know he was there.
Right.
By definition, he's now admitting that they're a gang, they're conspired together, they had a plan. There's so much that just by telling us about
just by repeating what he said. That's how you got it. Just by repeating what he said. Wow.
That's all I did, man.
That's cool.
Because I practiced it, I was prepared to do it and it's a great skill for when you're caught off guard. It's one of the best skills for when you're caught off guard.
Yeah, because you can just default to it by default. Yeah, that's awesome. So actually, I do want to ask that question, but I think I want to wait as to how to prepare for a negotiation. Let's go through. I just don't want to forget. So hopefully I won't, and you won't. But let's talk about the next chapter, which is you define as the label. And I remember when I first saw the chapter heading, I'm like, label, what does that mean? And it's then the subtitle is how to create trust with tactical empathy. So talk about what you're labeling and what that means.
So primarily, and labeling is pretty literal. Just put a label on it. Seems like, sounds like, looks like, feels like.
Okay.
You don't get any more complicated than that. There's actually an intentional simplicity to the structure. And it's meant to bypass part of the brain and trigger an involuntary contemplation and a response. It's why we don't do the therapist version of, well, what I'm hearing, Rod, is this is how you feel. That's too complicated, and it bogs the brain down. What I'm trying to do, I'm labeling a dynamic or an emotion that I either sense or I feel is hidden. Or it's a flip side of what's going on.
Oh, got it.
It's a simple device that can get in its application becomes a black belt skill. And it's also one of the principal ways, it's the best, it's better than asking questions for gathering information. I'll give you an example. One of our clients is in a big business deal, and they sense that one of two executives on the other side of the table are creating roadblocks behind the scenes. So instead of saying, what's the problem? What's the roadblock? Asking an appropriate question. Let's say these two guys were named were Tom and Bob. Mm-hmm. They just said innocently, it seems like Tom and Bob have problems with this. Now that gets right past the prefrontal cortex on the other side without realizing it. Their counterpart says, no, it's not Tom, it's Bob. Boom. He just gave up everything.
Right.
First of all, it ain't Tom. We don't got to worry about Tom anymore. Secondly, he admitted there is a problem and there is an obstruction. He told us exactly where it was.
Wow.
If they'd asked a question, there's no way they'd have got that kind of download of information. So our labels.
So give some other examples of labels, because I know people are, that haven't read the book or kind of wonder what, still probably not tracking this. So give some other examples.
All right. And this is one you could practice also. Okay. Somebody calls you on the phone and says, have you got a few minutes to talk? Mm-hmm. That happens to you 10 times a day. Instead of answering the question, respond with a label and say, sounds like there's something on your mind. And you will immediately get to the heart of it. Plus, you get a chance to practice a label. Sounds like there's something on your mind. It's going to save you so much time. Because have you got a few minutes to talk? Yes, there's something on their mind, but they're going to want to kill a whole bunch of time hammering and
embellish it, pre-frame it, all that business, and you get right to the heart of it.
You get to the heart of it.
Now, I wrote down some of the other ones that you've used. Like it sounds like you've really got your guard up, which that's a good one. Or seems like you've got a lot on your mind.
Yeah.
Just and these things, I guess it just really I would just say it diffuses the wrong word. It just gets through so that you get information back. That's the purpose of them, correct? And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and not only do you get information, but the other side feels good in sharing it with you, which is what a hostage negotiator does, is both gather information and build the relationship simultaneously instead of two separate processes.
Got it. Or, seems like something's holding you back. I mean, God, if they answer that question, I mean, you know exactly what their objections are. I mean, that's just an awesome question. Okay. So let's talk about the next chapter, which is beware of yes or master no. And how, I know you want to get them to know as fast as possible. Could you talk about what you mean by that?
I will. And I got to apologize because I want to back up.
Okay.
Because your labels, you got the best cheat sheet there, man. I mean, that is beautiful.
Okay.
And I think every one of your listeners, everybody that watches this, put those labels that Rod just went through on a 3x5 card and keep them by your phone.
Memorize those babies.
Work magic.
So let me repeat them again. It's, it sounds like you've really got your guard up. Or, talk about, that's just awesome for diffusing. Seems like you've got a lot on your mind. Seems like something's holding you back. Sounds like you're afraid to speak. So anyway, the guys, those are incredible tools to use when you're negotiating with somebody.
Very nice.
Oh, thank you. Well, look, I got them from you, brother. So it's and nothing to do with me. Anyway, so let's talk about getting to know quickly. And why? Why that's
all right. So yes is commitment. So you try to get somebody to say yes. It creates anxiety. Anxiety is a distraction. Anxiety takes them out of the moment and away from you. You don't need that in your communication. The last thing you need to do is take them out of the moment. They start worrying about the future. They start worrying about the past, which by definition are no longer in the moment. Yes or no, on the other hand, makes people feel safe and protected. If I've said no, I'm not under threat. And having just made myself feel safe and protected, now I'm in the moment and I'm paying attention and I can think things through more quickly. Like if something is really on the line, we don't bother with yes at all. Instead of saying, do you agree? It's as simple as saying to you, do you disagree? Are you against this? Is this a bad idea? And people will say, no, I don't disagree, but here's what I need to make it work. Boom, boom, boom. Think of how quickly you just cut through everything. A calibrated no is worth at least 5 yeses.
Wow. Okay. Write that down, guys. So some other questions that I've heard you speak or read in the book are, do you want this to fail?
Yeah.
Do you want this business to fail? Can you, what are some other examples of questions that will elicit a no that aren't threatening?
Our beautiful one, on somebody who's ghosted you, somebody that today it's ghost, they call it ghosting because it's a social media. They stop responding to you. We call them non-responding.
Ghosting. Right.
One line text message, or put this in the headline, the subject line of your email, nothing else. Have you given up on our project? Have you given up on hiring us? Have you given up on X? Whatever it is. Don't put anything else in there. Do not change a word.
No kidding.
Not one word.
Love it.
They will respond within 3 to 5 minutes of seeing that message.
Love it. Oh, that's a huge one, guys. Write that one down. So the next chapter is to get those 2 words that will transform any negotiation. What are those 2 words and how do you get them and why do you want them?
The 2 words are that's right. And our mantra is 4 words. Get to that's right. GTTR. Get to that's right. And the way you do that is critical. You don't make an argument. You don't convince. Stop convincing. You're killing yourself. Summarize the situation from their point of view, especially the stuff you don't like. Especially take everything you want to deny and just lay it out as an observation. It's a combination of labels. I'm sure it seems like we're not paying attention to what's going on here. I'm sure you feel like it's being pushed around. We started talking 6 months ago, and we haven't gotten this deal done, and I'm sure it feels like we're wasting your time. Summarize it from their perspective, lay it on thick. If you don't put the bad stuff about you in as strictly as an observation, you're killing yourself. When you hear that's right from the other side, keep going till you get a that's right, and then shut the front door. Go silent. Zip your lip. Zip it good, as Dr. Evil would say in Austin Powers. Because at that point in time, they will come to you.
No kidding. Oh, that's so powerful, guys. That's so freaking powerful. So talk about, and this is my favorite part, talk about the how and the what questions, that I think it's the how and what questions that, help me out here. I'm struggling. Help me. The questions that you use that you really, that really steer the conversation.
Yeah, it's a combination of a couple things. I mean, okay. So let's take our open-ended questions and let's throw 90
open-ended questions. Okay.
Let's cut the list down to how and what. How and what is deference. There's great power in deference. People love to tell us how. People love to tell us what. What they don't realize is that based on how we frame the question, we've constrained them to talking about a very specific area. We've made them feel like they're problem solving. We've made them feel good. We've made them feel instructional toward us. That's when people are in their most honest, because they're so comfortable with this entire thing that we've constructed. It also does something that Danny Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in behavioral economics, calls triggering slow thinking, triggering stop and think thinking. One of our favorites, our favorite way to say no is, how am I supposed to do that? With that tone of voice. What that does is, as my son Brandon has labeled this, forced empathy. It makes them stop and think about you and what your challenges are, what your perspectives are. And simultaneously makes them feel very good about it, which means they're dropping their guard. And it works wonders with people. Some people get so addicted to saying, how am I supposed to do that as an answer? They pretty much don't learn anything else because it works so well.
What are some other examples, if you don't mind sharing, of some how and what questions, if you've got any on the tip of your mind?
Well, there's always, how do you want to proceed? Let's say you've got some real problems and you've laid out the case in front of them with a summary, and they go silent, they don't say anything. And you say, how do we fix this?
How do we fix this? I love that. Oh man, that's so good. I love that. Awesome. So, why do you want the other side to go first?
Because I need to know what they're thinking. And I don't know for sure exactly how they're valuing everything. So I need to hear their perspective on the value. Plus, there's an absolute guarantee that they're hiding stuff from. And if I get them comfortable, if I use deference, the chance that and they're hiding it because it's important.
Right.
So the chances that they're going to feel comfortable enough to blurt it out and make me smarter are really high. And because it's important, it's probably going to change all my calculations. So my calculations, by definition, on whatever the business deal is worth, whatever the profitability is worth, are a guess. Now, they might be a really good guess, but I need some more data as to how good my guesses are. I need to find out what mistaken assumptions I've made so I can fix everything. That's why I want them going first.
Got it. Okay. And we back to those how and what questions. Those are creating the illusion of control. You're giving them the illusion of control. Is that
secret to gaining the upper hand in a negotiation is giving the other side the illusion of control.
Love it.
Fully a third of the people we deal with are going to be control freaks.
Okay.
And once they feel in control, they're going to drop their guard and they're going to be eminently convincible. The only thing they're worried about is control. As long as they don't feel out of control, they're cool. So I'm like, all right, you're in control. I mean, it's amazing if You can even tell somebody who's a control freak and you know who they are. You say, hey, look, you're in charge here. And they'll relax because that's all they really want. I mean, it's stunning as to how effective that is.
No kidding. You can just tell them you're in charge. That's awesome.
It's
so
stupid how effective that is.
Yeah, it's so simple. Okay. So the next chapter is guarantee execution. What do you mean by that? The subtitle is how to spot the lies and ensure follow through from everyone else. So you've gotten as much information as you possibly can through the open-ended questions, and helping them relax and getting them to know and making it as confrontational as possible. How do you get them to execute?
Yeah, exactly. Because profit isn't booked on deal signing. Profit is booked on implementation. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can buy a commercial building that has great earnings potential, and you start running into trouble, and that your profit gets soaked up by all sorts of problems that you didn't know were there, and implementation problems. So profit is an implementation. So you're going to go back to your how and what questions and use these as a device to lay out an implementation game plan.
Okay.
And questions like this are going to be, if you're using these calibrated questions, how do we keep this on track? How do we know if it's off track? If we find out it's off track, what are we going to do to repair it? I mean, those simple implementation execution questions, and since they're open-ended, calibrated, deferential, the other side is going to lay it out, now keeps you on track. You've negotiated in advance how you're going to track the problems and how you're going to fix them, because there are always problems.
Sure, and by virtue of them coming up with the solutions, you've enrolled them in those solutions. So because they're their ideas, quote unquote, and you steer them to where you want. I love that. Absolutely.
And they're going to implement the hell out of their ideas. They're going to love that because their ego is going to be invested in making it work.
Now, would you say that negotiation is as much or even maybe more listening than talking?
There's different ratios. Some say 2 to 1. Others have said 5 to 1 listening.
Wow.
And that doesn't mean that you shut up the entire time.
Right.
But, we got a saying that he or she who talks most loses. So you want to win a negotiation, the other side better be talking a lot more than you.
Okay. There you go. You guys heard it. So talk about the difference between the illusion of loss versus the possibility of gain.
Wow. It's, what, that is the craziest. And that is such a big deal. We can literally bend reality. We call that bending reality. Again, going back to Danny Kahneman, the prospect of a loss stings twice as much as the prospect of a gain. The prospect of losing $1,000 hurts twice as much as gaining $1,000. And Kahneman actually said in an unofficial interview, it's not twice as much, it's more like 5 to 7 times as much.
No kidding.
So all you got to do is reframe how they see the future. You got to understand what loss are calculating in their head, because 70% of buy decisions, 70% of decisions are based on avoiding loss. So you need to use the tools that we talked about already to find out what's in their head that they're worried about losing, because there's going to be something. And since it's in their head, all you do is you take the emotional intelligence tools and you change what their vision of the loss is. Now, your most powerful vision is the loss of the status quo. You're trying to get somebody to take a deal. Instead of saying, like, if you do this deal, you're going to make all this money, you say, if you don't do this deal, how much you're going to lose every day? And now you've just changed the vision of loss in their head so that the daily loss is in action. And that's going to eat at them. That's what keeps people up at night. That's the feeling, the thought pattern they can't shake. It sounds mercenary. I didn't invent it.
We will, as human beings, do more to avoid pain than gain pleasure. I've used that line 1,000 times, and this is an example of it. So, can you give an example of how you pointed out how you got around or proposed loss in a situation, just because I'm sure it'll be fascinating to hear an example of how you proposed the prospect of loss and mitigated the prospective pain through your questions that you used.
Well, yeah, we do it all the time. We talk with people about doing business with us.
Okay.
Because somebody will ask me.
Oh, sure. Got it.
Somebody asked me to quote a price for my consulting, which is high. And I'm sitting and talking, and every now and then I'm dumb enough to answer the question. And I'm recently sitting and talking to a guy who's talking to me about millions of dollars that he has on the line. And I quote my hourly rate, which is $3,500 an hour. He's in the middle of a $100 million deal. He goes like, oh, that's too high. And I was glad that I did that stupid thing one more time, because when he asked me my rate, I should have said, like, look, if this goes bad for you, what's it going to cost you? How much are you out if you don't fix this? If you do nothing and let this happen to you, what kind of train hits you? Because he's going to calculate the loss in his head. And my questions, my responses, my answers are going to change his focus, trigger the slow thinking that Danny Kahneman talked about on where the loss really is. Because most of the time, people don't calculate the actual loss. They calculate the perceived loss as if everything was rosy and everything worked perfectly. I should make $5,000 a month rent on this apartment.
Right.
But that's if everything was perfect. And now suddenly, if you let go of the apartment that's bringing in $500 a month, you're like, but I'm going to lose $4,500 a month. That was in your head. So most of the losses that people calculate in their head are inaccurate, and they're based on a bad perception of what reality is. And
usually, like worse than what it is. Is that what you're saying? It's magnified.
Worse than what it is, and more than likely they've come to accept the losses of the status quo, the whole boiling frog analogy. Since they came in incrementally, they've forgotten how much a property, let's say, is eating away at their bottom line because they're managing it improperly. The actual losses of what's going on today have come in incrementally, and they've absorbed them. And that's what in many cases, what you need to get somebody focused on in order to make a good decision.
Okay. So the last thing let's talk about, I know you've got bargain hard. Well, you could take a minute. Let's talk about that. And that really relates to splitting the difference. Can you speak about that chapter for a moment?
Yeah. At some point in time, many negotiations, a minority, not most, because if you negotiate well, you don't have to bargain. Our philosophy is do a great job in the negotiation in the lead up to the numbers, and you won't have to bargain at all. But you might get into some brass tacks. You might get into a little bit bare knuckle bargaining. And if so, how do I do it without getting killed and also singeing the other side's feelings? Because hard feelings equal lost opportunity and lost profit, equal
No
bad
question.
relationships.
You can over negotiate. Yeah, right.
Right. And we're very cautious of long-term negative effects.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're going to use a lot of our tactical empathy, tons of it. I mean, we overdo empathy in the bargaining process. But we're also going to come in with a very calculated approach. We call it the Ackerman model. And it's a combination of going second, still using anchoring. But even more important than anchoring is the incremental changes between offers. Okay. Understanding the sequential game that you never bargain against yourself. But however I've started, my next move, every move after has to be half as big as the previous one. It's kind of we got a little more complicated calculation, but every subsequent change in your position has to be in a diminishing difference. Smaller,
either go up smaller or come down smaller by half. Okay. Well, that's fascinating. Okay. All right. The last chapter, and we're doing this kind of fast. Guys, get the book. Just trust me on this. You got to have it. But the last chapter is about Black Swan, and then I've got a couple follow-up questions, but I really appreciate your time on this. Talk about the Black Swan. What is the Black Swan? How do you find it? Why do you want it?
Well, it's the hidden information. And
Okay.
the crazy thing about this, a real black swan, is where the hidden information overlaps. Like they're hiding information, so are we. Nobody's ever sat down at a negotiation table when they didn't have hidden cards, ever.
Right.
So what we really don't know is what's in the overlap of the unknowns. And I don't want to use a Donald Rumsfeld phrase, the unknown unknowns. But if you're hiding information and they are, and you are, and they are, we don't know what's in between. Now, what we want to do is we want to get them to drop their guard. We want to use deference. We want to take our time, because the gains from the black swans are force multipliers, are profit multipliers, or multipliers on removing obstacles. And that's what we're really after. Where's the overlap in the hidden?
Give me an example of one of your biggest black swans that you discovered in one of your negotiations, like a real win that was just like a holy cow, did he just say that kind of a moment? Can you think of one off the top of your head?
Yeah, well, we're negotiating. They're trying to bring me in for a regional conference for the National Contract Management Association. And there are awesome people up in Boston. They got money for books. They're going to videotape, but they don't have anything in their budget at all to pay a fee. So I start chatting with them, and I find out, well, do you guys have do you have a publication? Do you have a magazine? What do you put out? They go, no, we really don't do anything. But National does. I'm like, really? What do they have? Well, they got a publication that goes out to 20,000 people. Really? Would National like to help you secure a speaker that's not going to cost anybody any money? If we can get an article placed in a national publication, I get exposed to 20,000 people, and 20,000 people is a good number regardless anyway.
Sure.
This is early on in the creation of my company.
Yeah.
And National's like, yeah, we got to put stuff in a magazine anyway. Can we help a local chapter get a speaker that would cost them $15,000 otherwise? And that was what my fee was back then. And they'll trade it for an article in our magazine. Yeah. So if I hadn't got into them, and they didn't even know they had an asset that was tradable.
No kidding. That's a great example.
And then the head of their local conference wrote the article. We bylined it with both of us, so we both got credit for the articles. So she gets a whole bunch of visibility on top of everything else.
Win, 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 win. That's awesome. Love it. Love it. So, back to my question that I was waiting on. So what sort of preparation should you do in advance of a negotiation? I mean, I've read books about it, and, I teach, I do a pathetic attempt at my live events to try to teach negotiation. I'm going to, of course, be stealing a lot of your stuff now for moving forward, and pushing your book. I will push your book as well. But, my list has, what do you think they want? What do you want? How far are you willing to go? Things like that. But what besides that stock standard stuff, what do you do to prepare?
Well, you take those objectives, and then you design anywhere from 3 to 5 labels.
Oh yeah.
3 to 5 what and how questions that will trigger those responses.
Perfect.
And many of them, and then you need practice time. You don't play in a championship game not having played in preseason, whatever your sport is.
So you do some role playing, or how do you do that?
Do them on your everyday conversations. The practice time we talked about a minute ago. How many times a day somebody says, have you got a few minutes to talk?
Right.
It sounds like there's something on your mind is a practice label. You now build actually the neurosynaptic connection to label under pressure in your practice conversations.
Right.
You walk up to the water cooler. Somebody says, how are you today? And you say, sounds like you're having a good day. That's a practice of a label. And more than likely, they're going to gush, because if somebody says, how are you today? They got a whole bunch of stuff they're dying to say if they can get you to say, how are you right back? That's what they're really trying to do. They're trying to get you to respond so they can gush. Well, this is a quicker way to get them gushing.
Love it. Love it. So tell me, if you can think back, I just really, for my own curiosity, in a tense negotiation, what's the biggest risk you ever took?
Wow. You talking hostage or business?
Well, you know, I'm fascinated by the hostage, and that's just for my own pleasure. But whatever you pick.
Well, it was a win-what question. I was coaching a guy in a negotiation in the Philippines. Bad guy on the other side of the table is a serial killer. We don't know it at the time.
Wow.
He's a serial kidnapper, serial killer, lone kidnapper, and that makes him a unicorn. It's the only one I ever even heard of, let alone dealt with.
Wow.
We know after having caught this guy that he murdered victims.
Wow.
And he's trying to get a daily rate to take care of the hostages. It's going to cost you $200 a day while I figure out how much the ransom is going to be. So this is a bargaining over commodity. This is a price negotiation, and this guy's trying to drain us dry. And so my negotiator with our coaching on calibrated questions says, when we run out of money paying the daily rate, what's going to happen?
You asked that question?
Yeah.
Or you had him ask that question? Wow.
He asked that question. And this is a win-what. We refer to it as a time travel. It's
Right.
very deferential. It catches people off guard. When this goes bad, what's going to happen?
Right.
Is effectively what it is.
Right.
When you want to tell somebody like, hey, that ain't going to work, this is a perfect way to do it.
Right.
Our serial killer, murderer on the other side, hesitates for a second and he says, it'll be all right. Which nobody realized in a moment, but he just promised to never kill our hostage.
Wow.
We at that point in time, we had him. I started doing a happy dance behind the scenes. Everybody goes, what's your problem? I just said, this guy just promised he was never going to hurt our hostage. That means we got him.
No kidding.
And
Wow.
about a week and a half later, the Philippine National Police executed a rescue and saved our hostage.
No kidding. Wow. Wow. That's dramatic. Well, thank you. Well, listen, my friend, you have added so much tremendous value. The book has never split the difference. By the way, Chris has a great newsletter that you can subscribe to. You can text FBI Empathy to 22828, FBI EMPATHY to 22828, and you'll get on his list for his negotiation newsletter. I'm really grateful to have you on the show, my friend. It's been a lot of fun, fascinating for me personally, and I know for my listeners as well. So thanks again.
Rod, thanks. And I'll just add, when you send that text, don't let your autocorrect make it 2 words. FBI Empathy's got to be all 1 word, and you got to override the autocorrect, or you get something crazy.
Yeah, I had the same thing happen with multifamily boot camp for mine that I do. Okay, awesome. Thanks again, my friend. It was a lot of fun.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on, man. I feel like it's a privilege.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a minute to visit iTunes and leave your comments. For more resources or to connect with us further, please visit our website at rodkhleif.com. Tune in next week for our next show.